Elden Ring was one of the most impactful games of 2022, and the most enjoyable game that I've ever played. With this being my first FromSoftware game, I didn't know what to expect. But I'd heard Elden Ring was a great intro game to the FromSoft franchise, so I decided to buy it and see if it was any good. Safe to say, I definitely think I got my money's worth. From the very beginning, I was amazed by the world and the mysterious story surrounding it. From the NPC'S to the enemies, even the lore itself captured my attention, to the point that after my first playthrough, I've replayed it 12 more times. As someone who would consider themselves a fan of Elden Ring, I wanted to take the time to make a video on it that helped express my love for the game, as well as some problems that I have with it as well. So hopefully this does the game some justice, as well as maybe introduce some people to the world of Elden Ring. The open world in Elden Ring is gigantic, whether it be the starting area of Limgrave, the terrifying swamp of Caelid, the capital of Lindell, the subterranean shunning grounds, even the sewers themselves underneath can be explored. Yet, even with countless areas to find and explore, the game doesn't overwhelm the player by throwing these huge new areas at you. It allows for the player to go at their own pace and really explore each location to its entirety. The different designs of each area are so unique and detailed that it helps tell the story of the mysterious and broken world you're playing in. Take, for example, Volcano Manor, owned by Praetor Rykard. When the player is introduced to the manor, they'll see all the fancy detailed elements inside of it. The dining area, the well-made guest rooms, even the portrait of Radon, one of the bosses and Rykard's own brother. This is to give the front of the manor a more welcoming feeling to the player. Yet as the player explores and progresses through the manor, they soon come to realize the dark secrets that it holds. The many torture devices, the echoes of those still weeping in pain, the countless piles of burning bodies. For me, this type of storytelling is interesting, and really helps the player try and understand the type of person that Rykard was before the Shattering. The kind of person who, on the outside, may have at one point seemed to be this welcoming and high-status member of the Lands Between, but behind closed doors, enjoyed torturing people, and had little to no respect for others' lives. With so many more interesting areas to explore, I always find myself wanting to learn more about everything and everyone Elden Ring has to offer. With the open world just being part of why I love Elden Ring, another key element that makes it so amazing is the vast amount of greatly made NPCs. The NPCs in Elden Ring are what make the open world function so well. I feel that many NPCs in games are overlooked or not seen as important, but what I love about Elden Ring's approach to them is that each one is just as fascinating as the last. They all have their own motives for traversing the Lands Between, and being able to follow along with them and help them throughout the game makes the new interactions have more impact than expected at first. There's never a dull storyline or quest behind these characters for me. Whether they're a friendly Jar who aspires to become a great warrior, a man who wants nothing more than to know everything about anything in the Lands Between, or even a woman who wants to reunite with her mother. There are countless amounts of interesting NPC storyline and quests in Elden Ring, but the most memorable for me is the story of the nomadic merchants. These merchants are all over the Lands Between, selling you interesting items, outfits, and upgrades for your weapons. Side note, I really like that when you come across some merchants, they play these instruments unique to them, and the attention given to them while they play is so detailed. The different hand placements for each note, and even the addition of vibrato to the music they play. It's nice to know how much care FromSoft put into the details of even small things that many players wouldn't notice. But what fascinates me the most is that the merchants you meet are the lone survivors of a long-forgotten tribe that was locked deep below the capital of Lindell. Later on in the game, if the player chooses to traverse the sewers of Lindell, they'll come across an area below where they encounter a boss that they must defeat. After defeating the boss, there's a chest that contains an item. What's more interesting, however, is that the structure behind the chest is actually the entrance to a secret pathway. The player is met with the sad reality of the fate bestowed upon the long-forgotten tribe. All the merchants were consumed by madness, an affinity that makes the occupant go insane once succumbing to it. Along with the tribe, the player will also find, in my opinion, the most infuriating parkour level in the entire game. On my first playthrough, I died so many times I genuinely thought about leaving it and coming back later, or just doing it in a different playthrough altogether. but what I found hidden below was more surprising than I had expected. Once at the bottom, the player encounters another important NPC, the Three Fingers. The Three Fingers, although only seen for a brief cutscene, play a huge part in the story of Elden Ring. The Fingers will imbue the player with the Flame of Frenzy, which shifts the game's tone and has drastic consequences to it. With this just being one of the many examples to the importance of the NPC's designs and story, I feel it's time to talk about another major element of Elden Ring. When it comes to enemies in Elden Ring, I love how FromSoftware didn't put all their efforts into making just the main story bosses that everyone knows and loves. But even the side enemies, the ones you have to go through to get to the main bosses, have such great designs and uniqueness to them. From soldiers that dual-wield holy weapons that can summon multiple spears from the ground, wandering knights that only come out at night riding horses with cloaks concealing their face, or dragons all over the world that adapt with the special status effects around them. Just like NPCs, enemies play an important role in the world of Elden Ring. The time and care shown towards the design of these enemies is a breath of fresh air from games that just have the same enemies over and over, or enemies who just look different but have the exact same basic movesets. The Knight of the Great Jar are a perfect example of the innovation FromSoft shows towards creating interesting enemies. These enemies are actually other players' builds from other games. Every knight you fight was once a player just like you, and this concept is so amazing. Knowing that my personal build will be an enemy for someone else's playthrough in the future, and vice versa, is something amazing on its own. It's this type of unique design that makes me not mind dying to them. I'll never forget my first time seeing Rykard, the mixed feelings of disgust, but at the same time amazement. This in turn made fighting him more enjoyable for me. Even dying to Melania over and over again wasn't disheartening due to the sheer beauty of both of her phases. Seeing her go from wielding a golden katana in the first phase, to showing us the true power of her full Scarlet Rot form, made me so immersed and invested in defeating her. And even though many people see her on YouTube and Twitch, I feel that the first time you yourself fight her, it's a whole new experience that I would recommend to anyone wanting to dive into the FromSoft series. But this brings me to a major problem I have with some of the bosses FromSoft makes. The countless different moves from bosses and mobs in Elden Ring make every new encounter you come across exciting and interesting. But when you're either getting killed by spam AoE attacks, or getting caught by grabs that harness the power of a reformed Orthodox rabbi, that's what frustrates me and a big amount of the community the most. Enemies like Malekith, Godfrey, and that god-forsaken Erdtree spirit are what I mainly struggled with on my first playthrough, and even now in my New Game Plus 13 playthrough. For example, Malekith is a huge boss whose moveset is literally spinning and twirling like a wannabe anime protagonist. Now don't get me wrong, I'm by no means saying I'm a god at Elden Ring, but this boss is genuinely a pain to fight every new playthrough I do. There are barely any windows to attack, and after his combos he usually runs away before you can do any huge damage to him. The AoE slashing, the explosions at his feet to keep you from closing any distance, even the projectiles he throws at you while doing 5 back-to-back 360s mid-air do insane damage. It's fights like this that make me despise having to do them, and it feels more like an inconvenience rather than an enjoyable fight. I usually just spam Rivers of Blood or Bolt of Grand Sax for him, but I never really feel accomplished after defeating him. But after 12 playthroughs of Elden Ring, I only had 800 hours played. I still needed 200 more hours to get through before hitting 1,000 hours. So I finally traversed the unhinged world of Elden Ring PvP. Playing online in Elden Ring will most likely be one of the most entertaining, yet terrifying experiences a new player to the FromSoft series will receive. I like the multiple different ways of playing online and not being held down to just one main objective. First, there are invasions, where one can invade another player's world while they have a group of up to 3 people present. The main objective is to kill the host however you can. AI enemies don't attack you as an invader, but the host and his friends still can. The creative ways I see some people kill hosts is actually impressive and really funny at times. Next is being a phantom or a cooperator. The objective of a phantom is to help the host and beat whatever boss they may summon them for. This really is useful, especially if you're stuck on a boss and need a little bit more DPS or support throughout the fight. There are even phantoms called hunters that have the main objective of only killing invaders. The next, and my personal favorite, are duelists. Duelists are players that have the main objective to again kill the host, but it's in a 1v1 setting where both players don't receive outside help. Unlike invaders, duelists have to get summoned in order to join another world. I like this the most because I have a lot of fun dueling my friends with different builds or cosplays as Elden Ring bosses. Now, like every online game, there were some overpowered elements at the start, but I feel FromSoft has done a good job at balancing both weapons and even skill-based matchmaking, especially if you look at other online games. But no update in Elden Ring beats the most recent add-on to the PvP platform. The Colosseum update added 3 new areas for dueling. Now players didn't have to meet at random areas on the map and could now fight in the 3 different areas provided. For me, this update was great. It showed FromSoft was listening to its community and was working hard to give the player a great experience. What made the update even better was the fact players were able to use AI-based summons like in PvE. Instantly, the first thing my friends and I did were hold Pokemon-type battles in the arenas. We had a blast just summoning random ashes to fight each other. With everything I've talked about, from the open world to NPCs to online, this brings me to the final part of this review. The element of the game that, without it, makes everything I've talked about up to this point feel incomplete. As someone who really enjoys the score of many games, I really felt it was important to have this moment to talk about the most beautiful part of Elden Ring to me. Without the masterful score that Elden Ring provides, the world wouldn't come close to being as impactful as it is. Whether it's a boss battle, area on the map, or even just the main theme itself, each composition has its own unique flair that helps put together everything the player does or encounters. The Godskin Apostle theme in particular is one of my most favorite pieces in the game. Every time I face a Godskin, I always try to drag the fight out as much as possible, just so I can listen to it in its entirety. From the 67 plus different pieces in the game, it's by far one of my favorites. You also have the beautiful endgame boss theme that really makes you feel that this amazing journey you've been on is finally coming to a satisfying end. Even after getting my cranium smashed in 500 times by Malekith, I still enjoyed both parts of his themes, and I'm really glad FromSoft took the time to make 2 themes for each 2-phase boss in the game. All in all, without the masterpiece of a soundtrack, Elden Ring and its huge open world wouldn't be as nearly beautiful without it. With these different aspects of the game all being beautiful on their own, the soundtrack ties them all together so harmoniously that I refuse to not acknowledge it in its own segment. With everything I've talked about up to now, I thoroughly can say that Elden Ring was the most beautiful and amazing game that I have ever played. So this will conclude my 1000 hour Elden Ring review. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. I know this isn't the type of video style I normally do, but I really wanted to branch out from time to time rather than just stick to only EXE videos. I've had a great time making this video throughout the past couple weeks, and want to give a huge shout out to my friend Carol for helping me with the thumbnail. I'm going to put her social in the description below, along with some other friends that helped make this video possible. Hopefully I'll be back with another video soon. Graduation is this year for me, and I've been really busy with school, but I'll keep you all updated. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.